The galaxy had always been a vast, intricate tapestry of civilizations. Countless species had risen, fallen, and woven themselves into the intricate web of interstellar society, each one contributing a thread to the grand narrative of peace and coexistence. For eons, the balance was delicately maintained, with diplomacy and shared values holding together worlds separated by light years. War was rare, and when it occurred, it was quickly extinguished by the joint efforts of the galaxy's most influential alliances. Among these alliances, none was more renowned than the United Stellar Accord, a coalition of powerful species who had sworn to keep the peace, even if it meant making harsh decisions in the name of greater good. Humanity was a recent addition to this grand stage. Known as Deathworlders by other species due to their harsh, chaotic home planet, Earth, humans were regarded with a mix of awe and caution. Their resilience, adaptability, and ability to survive on a world filled with dangers were both respected and feared. Despite these intimidating traits, humans had consistently shown a surprising kindness and eagerness to befriend other species. They traded generously, assisted in humanitarian crises, and showed a particular willingness to forgive offenses that might have otherwise led to conflict. To the other species, humans seemed almost paradoxical, a species hardened by the dangers of their home world, yet determined to spread peace and understanding. As time passed, humanity's reputation as the kind Deathworlders became almost a legend. Other species found themselves underestimating humans, seeing them as soft-hearted, always willing to compromise. The diplomats of Earth were welcomed at every interstellar conference, their presence a reminder of how far the galaxy had come. There were whispers, however, of the humans' hidden strength. Some species believed that the kindness of humans was merely a facade, a choice rather than a weakness. Still, those who held this view were in the minority, and most chose to believe that humans would always be accommodating, always willing to forgive. But everything changed with the emergence of the United Stellar Accord's new leaders, a coalition of hardline species determined to reshape the galaxy to their vision. They believed in enforcing a unified order across all species, a form of authoritarian control cloaked under the banner of security and peace. The Accord's leaders felt that too many smaller species were left vulnerable, and that they alone could provide the structure needed to keep the galaxy from falling into chaos. Their intentions were not necessarily malevolent, but their methods were uncompromising. Their rule began with laws and regulations, but soon escalated to demands, taxes, and eventually, the threat of force. At first, the Accord's focus was on the weaker species, those who couldn't resist or pose a serious challenge. They moved quickly, using their influence to take control of trade routes, absorb neutral systems, and force smaller planets into compliance. Many planets agreed reluctantly, hoping that submission would grant them a peaceful existence. Yet every time they gave in, the Accord's grip tightened, demanding more resources, more obedience. Soon, entire species were stripped of autonomy. Their leaders turned into mere figureheads under the Accord's shadow. Humanity watched these developments with a silent, growing unease. They were distant enough not to be directly affected, but their values were at odds with the Accord's oppressive methods. The humans remained patient, attempting to work through diplomatic channels, to urge the Accord to seek peaceful coexistence instead of domination. Human diplomats delivered messages, negotiated treaties, and made every effort to protect the vulnerable species trapped under the Accord's control. The other species saw humanity's restraint as weakness. Even those who sympathized with the Deathworlders' values began to believe that humans were simply incapable of standing up against the Accord's iron rule. Surely, they thought, if the humans had any true strength, they would have intervened by now. Yet the humans continued their work quietly, organizing relief efforts, offering asylum to refugees, and subtly providing aid to planets that struggled under the Accord's demands. But the Accord's leaders grew increasingly frustrated with humanity's quiet interference. While the humans avoided direct confrontation, their subtle defiance undermined the Accord's control and emboldened resistance movements across several systems. In a bid to make an example out of them, The Accord orchestrated a calculated strike on a human outpost located in a neutral zone. The outpost was barely armed, primarily a research station with scientists and technicians stationed there to study the unique celestial phenomena of the region. It posed no threat to the Accord, nor had it engaged in any act of resistance. The attack was swift and brutal. Accord forces destroyed the station without warning, citing it as a necessary enforcement action to secure the border. Dozens of lives were lost, and the Accord's leaders released a public statement claiming that the humans had overstepped, had encouraged rebellion among other species, and that they needed to be reminded of their place in the galactic order. News of the attack spread quickly, carried on the lips of horrified witnesses, and broadcast on interstellar news channels. For the first time, the galaxy witnessed a shift in humanity's demeanor. The shock of the attack echoed across Earth and its colonies, sparking a silent, collective anger that simmered beneath the surface. For generations, humanity had striven to maintain peace, to avoid conflict, and to uphold the principles of coexistence. But this was no longer a simple matter of diplomacy. The Accord had crossed a line that could not be ignored. Human diplomats withdrew from interstellar assemblies. Trade ships returned home, and human military fleets began to reassemble, pulling back from shared territories. It was as if humanity had turned inward, a quiet storm building on the horizon. Other species began to whisper, to wonder what this meant. The galaxy had grown accustomed to the humans' kindness, their willingness to turn the other cheek, and for the first time, the thought arose, what would happen if the humans decided not to be so kind? On Earth, the message from the government was clear, though only a few words long. Humanity has been patient. Now, patience has ended. Across the human colonies, in cities on distant moons and stations orbiting distant stars, a new resolve took hold. Factories on Mars and Europa worked night and day, churning out weapons and starships designed for war. Soldiers trained with an intensity that hadn't been seen since the earliest days of humanity's interstellar expansion. And everywhere, from Earth to the outermost colonies, a sense of quiet fury filled the air. The Accord's leaders watched these developments with growing concern. They had expected humans to protest, to negotiate, to perhaps express outrage. But the silent, focused preparation they witnessed instead unsettled them. As they continued their expansion, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had awakened something they didn't fully understand, a force that had been dormant for too long, waiting, and now roused from its slumber. And so, the galaxy held its breath, poised on the edge of a storm unlike any it had seen before, as the Deathworlders, the humans who had long been known for their kindness and patience, prepared to show the galaxy what lay beneath their gentle exterior. The Accord's influence spread rapidly across the galaxy, seizing control over resources, trade routes, and even the governance of entire systems. Their leaders preached unity and order, painting their occupation as a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. Many species found themselves trapped in this web of authority, forced into compliance as the Accord tightened its grip. They knew that any resistance would be met with brutal efficiency. While a few species had the courage to rebel, their attempts were swiftly crushed, leaving the rest of the galaxy fearful and disillusioned. As the Accord's power grew, their focus shifted back to the humans, who had become a symbol of quiet defiance. Rumors spread that the humans were harboring refugees, aiding resistance movements in secret, and providing safe passage for those who dared to escape the Accord's grasp. The Accord couldn't ignore this any longer. If they wanted total control, they had to silence humanity's influence. However, the Accord's leaders were cautious. They knew the humans were no ordinary species. Despite their history of peace, the tales of their resilience and adaptability were legendary. If humanity chose to rise up, they could become a significant threat. The Accord strategists devised a plan to strike a decisive blow. They aimed to send a message not only to humanity, but to all species watching from the sidelines. By breaking the humans, they would show the galaxy the price of rebellion. After much debate, the Accord's Council agreed to an operation targeting several human settlements near the borders of Accord-controlled space. These settlements were not military strongholds. They were peaceful, mixed-population outposts where humans and other species lived side by side in harmony. The Council believed that a swift, calculated strike on these settlements would weaken humanity's resolve and force them back into submission. And so, the Accord prepared for their attack. Fleets were mobilized, warships equipped with weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. The Accord wanted to capture the human outposts, make a public display of their defeat, and humiliate humanity into compliance. The operation began with a precision assault on the settlement's communication arrays, cutting them off from the rest of human-controlled space. Ships descended from the darkness of space, looming over the peaceful outposts with an air of menace. The first wave hit swiftly, taking down the limited defenses of the settlements with ease. The outposts were overwhelmed, their inhabitants scrambling in confusion and terror. Humans and their alien allies tried to resist, but they were outmatched by the Accord's advanced technology and sheer numbers. Buildings crumbled under bombardments, and the once bustling streets filled with smoke and fire. Some civilians managed to flee into the forests and caves nearby, but many were captured and rounded up. The Accord soldiers took their time, ensuring the scene was thoroughly documented for broadcast, a grim warning to any who dared to follow in humanity's footsteps. Back on Earth, the silence from the border settlements was immediately noticed. Humanity's leaders received fragments of distress signals before the communications were severed, snippets of desperate voices drowned out by static. For hours, they could only watch as each attempt to reach their outposts was met with silence. It didn't take long for news to arrive. The Accord, bold and triumphant, broadcast footage of their victory across the galactic network. They showed humans in chains, beaten but unbroken, their eyes filled with defiance as they faced. The Accord's broadcast of their victory over the human settlement spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Species from every corner watched, horrified yet captivated, as the once peaceful outposts lay in ruins. Images of captured humans, bruised and bloodied, but still defiant, ignited a wave of unease across the interstellar community. For generations, humanity had been known as steadfast allies, partners in progress who sought understanding over conflict. Now, for the first time, the galaxy saw a side of humanity they had never considered, the side that had been pushed too far. Earth's reaction was immediate and electric. News of the assault on their settlements galvanized the human populace in a way that no external threat had done before. People gathered in public squares, watching the broadcast with clenched fists and grim faces, exchanging stories of loved ones in those outposts, of friends and family now held captive under the Accord's rule. The sense of betrayal cut deeply. Humanity had given the Accord countless chances, had endured the encroachment upon their borders, and had extended olive branches at every turn. Now, the Accord had answered this goodwill with violence and arrogance, assuming that humans would simply accept this humiliation. Humanity's leaders convened in a closed session, the air thick with a tension that no words could ease. Military officials and diplomats debated fiercely, but the room soon reached a grim consensus. This was no longer a matter of territory or politics. It was about standing up for those who could not stand for themselves. The Accord had made a critical error. They had mistaken patience for weakness, mistaking humanity's reluctance for violence as an inability to defend itself. Now, the humans would show them just how grave that error was. A plan was set into motion, and it spread through humanity's colonies and allies with a clarity and efficiency that left no room for doubt. Factories and shipyards that had lain dormant for decades roared back to life, producing warships and weapons with a relentless speed that astonished even seasoned engineers. Combat vessels were outfitted with newly developed technology, designed to disable the Accord's energy shields and pierce their most advanced armor. Special forces trained in silence, honing their skills for the kind of guerrilla warfare that had been perfected in humanity's early years of space exploration. The galaxy watched with bated breath as humanity's forces mobilized, a sight so unexpected and powerful that it shifted the entire political landscape. Planets under the Accord's rule held their breath, wondering if this mysterious transformation would finally bring an end to the regime's iron grip. Even within the Accord, factions began to stir, questioning the wisdom of provoking humanity. The memory of Earth's kindness and patience lingered like a ghost, making many question if this aggression was truly worth the potential consequences. The first strike was swift, a precision attack that left the Accord reeling. Human fleets warped into Accord-controlled space with a ferocity and coordination that defied all expectations. Their first target was the very fleet that had been stationed near the captured settlements, a powerful force of Accord warships that had been left confident and unprepared after their supposed victory. The humans didn't waste time with warnings. Instead, they unleashed a torrent of firepower that decimated the fleet within minutes, catching the Accord off guard. Human ships moved with deadly purpose, each maneuver a calculated blow to the Accord's defenses. Their weaponry was devastating, but it was their tactics that truly caught the Accord off guard. Human commanders, veterans of countless skirmishes and simulations, used their knowledge of Accord strategies against them. They struck at weak points with surgical precision, outmaneuvering and outthinking their opponents at every turn. Accord ships were destroyed or disabled one by one, leaving the survivors scrambling to retreat. Those who survived carried a chilling message back to their leaders. Humanity was no longer negotiating. But the humans did not stop with mere destruction. After every engagement, they left behind a message, etched into the remnants of the Accord's destroyed ships, clear and unmistakable. "We warned you." The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Word of humanity's precision strikes spread rapidly, and with each new victory, fear gripped the Accord's ranks. Humanity's advance was relentless, and their objectives were clear. They dismantled Accord bases, liberated occupied worlds, and struck down anyone who stood in their way. And yet, there was no sadistic pleasure in their actions. Humanity was not looking to conquer or enslave. They sought only to break the chains of oppression that had bound their allies and kin. In liberated systems, cheers erupted as Accord forces were driven out. Humanity treated the liberated populations with care, offering food, medical supplies, and even defensive technology to help them rebuild. For the people who had suffered under the Accord's rule, the humans became symbols of hope, warriors who had risen to stand against tyranny. Their resolve inspired rebellions on other Accord-controlled planets, where long-subdued species now found the courage to resist. Accord bases burned as oppressed peoples reclaimed their worlds, bolstered by the knowledge that humanity was fighting by their side. Within the Accord's leadership, panic took root. Their council chambers were filled with arguments, fear gripping the once arrogant rulers as they debated how to respond. The members who had once mocked humanity's restraint now found themselves desperately searching for ways to placate them. Diplomats were dispatched to Earth, bearing messages of peace, offers of treaties, and even concessions. But humanity met these gestures with an impenetrable silence. The Accord's leaders were bewildered. Humanity's silence was as chilling as their newfound aggression. The Deathworlders had always been approachable, even compassionate. Now, they had become an unyielding force, speaking only through action. Their diplomats remained silent, their leaders unseen. Humanity's forces spoke through their actions on the battlefield, and each victory sent a message louder than words. Humanity's kindness had limits, and those limits had been reached. In a last-ditch effort, the Accord decided to make a stand. They fortified their capital, pulling in ships and soldiers from across their empire. Every defense system was activated, every battalion ordered to hold their ground. The Accord's leaders watched as their forces took positions, the grim understanding settling in that this might be the final stand between them and the relentless advance of humanity. But when humanity arrived, it was with a precision and calmness that belied the destruction they had wrought. Their fleets arrived in silence, orbiting the Accord's capital planet with a chilling efficiency. They did not broadcast demands, nor did they issue ultimatums. The Accord's leaders, desperate, reached out, pleading for negotiations. But humanity's only response was to begin the assault. The battle was swift and decisive. Human forces sliced through the Accord's defenses with a level of coordination and efficiency that left no room for resistance. Their ships moved like phantoms, exploiting weaknesses in the Accord's lines with an almost eerie foresight. Every move was calculated, every strike measured. It was as if humanity had rehearsed this moment countless times, every tactic sharpened to perfection. The Accord's forces crumbled under the onslaught, and their leaders watched in horror as their capital fell. As the final Accord stronghold surrendered, humanity's forces landed. Soldiers moved through the corridors of the Accord's Central Command building, passing through halls once filled with the sounds of confidence and authority. Now, silence reigned. Humanity had no desire for cruelty or conquest. They sought only justice, ensuring that those who had oppressed others would face the consequences of their actions. In the aftermath, humanity took no pleasure in parading their victory. They simply restored freedom to the oppressed worlds, offering them the support needed to rebuild. They installed no puppet governments, claimed no territories for themselves. The liberated worlds were given back to their people, left with the means to defend themselves and the assurance that humanity would stand by them if the need arose. The Accord was dismantled, its leaders scattered and humbled. Humanity withdrew, returning to their own worlds, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. They had shown the galaxy that kindness was a choice that should never be mistaken for weakness. The memory of the reckoning, of humanity's rise from patience to wrath, became legend. Stories spread across the stars of how Deathworlders had once been pushed too far, of how they had risen like a tempest to defend the innocent. And so, to this day, every species tells stories of the day Deathworlders decided to stop being nice, a day that taught the galaxy that kindness is a gift, one to be cherished, and that when pushed too far, even the most compassionate will become fierce guardians of justice.